Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Within Range Coaching Podcast. I'm Ranger, certified holistic success coach, and in this podcast, I'm breaking down the journey that entrepreneurs face as they start their organization, find solutions to the roadblocks in their way, and create an impact that lasts. So if you're an entrepreneur, nonprofit leader, or purpose-driven community member that wants to learn how to grow your impact and develop yourself as the person behind the mission, then this podcast is for you. I know you're just as eager to get started as I am, so let's jump right in. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everybody, and welcome to today's episode of the Within Range Coaching Podcast. And we're continuing on with our Walk Across America series, but we're going to take a step back from the folks and entrepreneurs, nonprofit leaders, and community members that I've met during the journey. And we're going to kind of circle back to one of the organizations that I'm raising money for while I am making my jaunt across our nation. As most of you know, I'm raising money for 3 different charities, Bigger Than the Trail, which is a mental health advocacy group, and the Hospice Promise Foundation that covers non-medical hospice-related expenses for those going through treatment. And, of course, I'm also raising money for the Future Farmers of America. And, I mean, I'll probably make a whole other podcast episode about my background in FFA and why it was so impactful for me and why I chose to raise money for them. But I feel like by the end of this conversation, you'll have a good understanding of really, I guess, the implications and the importance of it from someone that is currently working for the FFA. And when I say working, I mean she is in the trenches. She's been there for 22-ish years.
Yes.
She's nodding yes. Perfect. So she's been there for 22 years and is currently serving as a communications manager for the national organization. I am joined by Kristy Meyer. Kristy, thank you for joining us today.
Thanks for having me, Ranger. I appreciate it.
Of course, yeah. And I mean, I'm already excited to jump in. I feel like we can kind of nerd out on the blue and gold. But in terms of you, would you mind sharing with us what your intention for today's episode is and a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, so my intention for today's episode is really for people to understand the importance of agriculture education and FFA and what it brings, not just to those involved in it, but to those to support it. And I can just kind of hop in with a little bit about my background. The interesting thing about me is I've worked at FFA for 22 years, but I do not have an FFA background. I was never an FFA member. And I was not in agriculture. I moved around a lot with my family and never had the opportunity to join FFA. Instead, I majored in journalism and went to work for a local newspaper. And I always joke that it might have been a little bit of foreshadowing because I was farm editor for 6 months. After a while, I loved being a journalist. I love newspaper. The hours weren't always the best. And I had a colleague who mentioned that FFA was looking for someone in a communications position. And when I interviewed for the position, I told the director at the time, I said, the great thing is I know nothing about agriculture, so who better to tell that story? And I've been telling the story of agriculture for 22 years. And honestly, Ranger, I've fallen in love with it. And it means so much. It's why I have never left.
Interesting. I want to touch on what you just said. You know nothing about agriculture, so who better to tell the story? Like, why do you say that?
Well, I say that when I at least started, right? When I started, I didn't know anything about FFA. And so I thought, well, for someone who doesn't know everything, it's probably easier to tell the story and not get bogged down in some of the acronyms and all of the background. For those of your listeners who are in FFA, they know what I mean by acronyms. People always talk about like this CDE or this LDE. And for those of us who aren't in it, we don't know what it means, right? So I was able to kind of boil it down. I
get bogged down by those all the time. You know, what is it? SAE, CDE, GHC. That's like all these crazy things. And it's like when you're, again, I'm just a few years out. Well, oh my gosh, like almost 10 years out. Geez. And it's still, whenever I see it, I'm like, wait, I'm like counting on my fingers trying to remember. But yeah, no, I think what you said there is really interesting, that you're able to kind of let your own curiosity and I guess really just be that sponge and explain it in a way that others could easily understand. Because you're not getting caught down in the semantics and the jargon, the million acronyms that are present. You're able to really dive in and tell that story for yourself, for your own understanding, which in turn, I assume, would make it easier for those reading it to understand.
Yeah, at least that's my hope, right? Is by not really knowing I feel like after 22 years, I know a little bit more, but I'm always learning something new. And I will tell you, the other thing about this position is I am never bored. There are so many amazing stories out there about our members, our alumni, the difference they're making in their communities and in agriculture, that I'm never bored. And I'm always having stories to share out with people and let them know what a difference these individuals are making.
Yeah, and if you could just, I want to ask more about, the difference, those stories, how you find them, etc. And again, it sounds silly for me to ask, but can you kind of just explain what the FFA is and the, like, who can be in it? What does it do? Like, kind of give that bare bone basic description for us.
Yeah, absolutely. So the unique thing about FFAs, our organization, is what we call intracurricular. So in order for a person to be an FFA member, they have to take an agricultural education class. So their schools have to have agriculture education classes. And if they have those classes, then they can have an FFA chapter and be involved. And there's different levels of involvement of those FFA chapters, right? Some members get all in and participate wholeheartedly, do leadership positions, do competitive events. Many do what we call supervised agriculture experiences, SAEs, if you were using the acronyms. But those are projects. Those are projects that are hands-on learning experiences for those members. And the great thing about FFA is that they have those opportunities, right? So they can kind of explore all those different career pathways. I like to share with people that this organization creates leaders, but it also helps our members determine what career pathways they're going to take too. And as you know, and your listeners may know too, there are more than 350 careers in agriculture. It's not just production agriculture. So it's really an opportunity for our members to explore that. And a little bit further than that, to really give back to their community, because service is also a key. So FFA really is a student-led organization that creates premier leadership, personal growth, and career success.
Perfect. And to really tie that all in, there's the three circles of ag. So there's the classroom, you go to the class. I mean, I took an agricultural mechanics class, ag biology, animal science one, or not animal science, agricultural sciences one, which was plants, agricultural sciences two, which was animals for us. So there's that classroom experience, the SAE, which is the supervised agricultural experience. I'm raising a sheep. I'm doing a landscaping business. I'm growing vegetables for the fair. And then there's the CDE, which is career development events, and those are the competitions. So for me, I did the veterinary science one,
Nice.
Started that at my school, still going.
Awesome.
Livestock judging. And then, it's like like the Napoleon Dynamite thing, like they're going and they're tasting the milk or looking at the different, kind of like the nerdy farming stuff. But there's also the ones that are like, oh, we're doing prepared public speaking. This is a 10-minute speech. We're going to do job interview. Like you were saying, it's not just the boots on the ground, hoers, mowers, but growers. It's the people that are, like the auxiliary parts of it too, right? The salesmen, the managers, the leadership, the advocates. It's really more broad than I think people think when they hear Future Farmers of America, which makes total sense. I've had people be like, oh, you're just raising money for farm kids? I'm like, kind of, but no.
Right. I always like to tell people too that I think that's a misnomer, right? Agriculture is all around us, every day, from the food we eat, the clothes we wear, the fuel in our car. Every single thing you touch each day has a component of agriculture. And I think when you break that down and let people understand how important that is and how important it is to fill that talent pipeline in the agriculture industry, it gives it kind of another perspective.
Yeah, and that is a discussion that I've had with, I don't know, hundreds of people basically at this point. Just like explaining what it is. Like, oh, again, like we were saying, like it's not just the boots on the ground, which that is very much needed, but it's career in general, not just, it's not like if you're an FFA, you can only go into ag, but you have that understanding and that background to bring it into these other careers.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So to kind of explain it on this, let's start maybe from the student side, from what you have been able to see and what you've been able to observe. Because again, since you weren't in it, I think you kind of have that unique perspective of what you've seen in kids that have gone through the program. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Oh, yeah, I would be more than happy to talk about that. I'm going to go back a few years, though. So when I started trying to drink from the fire hose, everything that the organization was and meant, but the aha moment for me was when I went to our national convention. And so our national convention is the largest student convention. And at the time, I think our attendance was about 50 or 60,000. Again, this was 22 years ago. And watching these students and their faces, and as they were meeting other people and connecting and then hearing their stories, it really impacted me of what a difference FFA made. We had stories of people telling us that they were afraid to talk in front of people until they took an ag class, and then their ag instructor, encouraged them to do public speaking, and then they were fine being a public speaker, and then they had leadership positions. They became a state officer or chapter officer. And so you really watched how their relationship with their ag advisor, encouraging them to think a little bit outside the box and push them, help them develop not just those academic skills, but those soft skills, right? That help you in leadership roles. So I really noticed that. And honestly, I think it was maybe that my first or second year, I kept thinking, it's really too bad that my high school didn't have a chapter, because it just did so much for these students. And so over the years, I've just continued to watch that, and the stories that come out of, I was really shy. I was in the back of the classroom. I never wanted to get involved. I took an FFA intro class, and then I started to get involved and decided what pathway I wanted to take, decided what I wanted to study. A man who won star in agri-science one year, and he ended up creating a way to end kudzu, which is an invasive species in the South. And so he figured out how to do that, and he patented it, and then he went to work for NASA. So when you hear that, you're like, oh, okay, that's pretty impressive.
Yeah, and I think that's so interesting, because it sounds like there's such a spectrum of impact that the organization can make on someone, whether it's going from just the shy, probably lacking confidence kid to, even being a chapter officer, like putting themselves in that position to lose, to be, we vote on it and all that kind of stuff, right? So being able to even say, I'll put my hat in the ring, to winning it, right? All the way up to this kid, which I feel like that's a whole story in and of itself, to
yes,
to go invent something that I'm sure other people were trying to figure out, like actual scientists. That's crazy. And I guess more so, I want your opinion on this, because the way that I've kind of described it is organizations like FFA and even fraternity. I was in the Alpha Gamma Rho fraternity, so I felt like it was the college version almost. It really gives you that padding and like a safe place to fail. Because, yes. Okay, I'm glad that you kind of agree on that one too. Like, what do you think is that? What do you think is important about that for kids and development?
I think it's that support system. So for those who don't know, FFA is often identified by the iconic blue corduroy jacket. Official dress is that blue corduroy jacket, skirts or pants for women now, and black pants for men. But a lot of times we ask our members what that jacket means, just because it's a symbol. And so many times we have students tell us that when they zip up that jacket, they feel a part of something. They feel like they're a family. They feel like they're a community. And I think that's so important, especially for the age that they are, right? To feel a part of something, to have that support system. So whether that support system be fellow FFA members or the advisor, but I think that helps them, because inevitably there's going to be times in your life where you're not going to necessarily always succeed, right? But to have that support system there. And I think that's what that offers, whether it be your fellow chapter members or your advisor or your supporters, you end up having a support system through FFA.
Yeah. And what you're saying right there reminded me of something. Have you ever heard of the American Legion?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. So they do something called Boys State, which is like the mock government, whatever, foreshadowing of a podcast episode I have coming up for those listening. And I was sent to it from my school, and I ran for Secretary of State, I think. I didn't know what Secretary of State did. It sounded like fun. I wanted to be the sauce person. I thought it was cute. And during my speech, I made I referenced the FFA Creed, which is like this 5-paragraph, I don't know, we all recite it together. It sounds crazy. But I said something from it. And 3 hours later, after all the speeches and elections, another guy from another chapter from the other side of the state hunted me down and was like, was that an FFA reference? I was like, yeah. And he's like, shook my hand and hugged me. He's all like, I've been looking for other people, blah, blah, blah. And he had like his chapter pin and his cowboy hat. I was like, no
nice.
freaking way. That's so funny. And him and I are still buddies to this day. Like what, again, like 10, 12 years ago. So like you were saying, it really is a community that is, I don't know. I feel like it's stronger than like other basic clubs, you know, because again, it's intracurricular. Like, you know that you have something in common beyond just, I put my name on on a club roster, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And I think that's one of the things that we strive for, right? Is that when everybody gets together at some of these events like our convention, that they can find people and maybe network with them, right? Maybe they find somebody from the completely opposite side of the United States or from Puerto Rico or from the US Virgin Islands and can connect. So they have something in common. Who would think you would have something in common from somebody that far away, but having that common denominator to start that conversation, that's important.
Yeah. And all pretty much every job that I've ever been in, I asked them if they were involved in like, oh, like what clubs were you in high school? What extracurriculars were you in college? You know, because I'm trying to find like, oh, you know, I was in FFA and I'm like, oh, thank God we can be friends. Not just like, if you're not an FFA, we can't be friends, but it's like, okay, now it's like easier to have a conversation. Like, oh, what did you raise? Oh, yeah, that's what my ring is. Like, you know, so yeah, that common denominator is so important. In terms of national convention, I went to my first one in 2018 and President Trump was there, which, politics aside, whatever, we can talk about that on another episode, maybe that we don't publish here. But like, it's a big deal. Like, I don't think the president of the US would show up to just any club get together with a bunch of kids. So it's a very, I don't know, it's maybe from your side, you can say something different about it, but I thought that was crazy.
It was crazy.
Yeah.
And my side has a lot to do with the dignitaries when they come in.
Yeah.
Doing the invitations and everything, and then working with the arena. So side note, our convention, super large. This year we had over 73,000 people in attendance, but we only have 105 people at the center. So I always like to sing the praises of my colleagues that 105 of us put on that convention. So I'm pretty proud of my colleagues.
That's amazing.
Yeah, but we always invite the Secretary of Ag and the Secretary of Education, and then the sitting president. We usually invite him the first 2 years, so it's not going to conflict with like a campaigning, position. And then we always invite the sitting mayor of the city and the governor, because Indianapolis currently hosts our convention. And so the mayor and the governor have been instrumental in helping us get those supports. So, but yeah, I feel like those dignitaries understand what our members are, right? Our members are those future leaders. They're going to make a difference. And they're also going to be those leaders in industry too. So
they're kind of understanding that if we support these kids, then they're going to be the ones that are kind of like, the changing of the guard. Like they're going to be the ones that are potentially president or governor or mayor, or even just a community member that shows up and does the work and, is on the committees.
Absolutely. And, that's one of the things too. We talked a little bit about the different facets of FFA, but one area is leadership. We talked about that, some of the leadership conferences, but another area we talk about is advocacy, of how to advocate for agriculture, but also knowing that is important, how to advocate, how to know those leaders in your community so you can work with those leaders, talk with those leaders. Washington Leadership Conference in DC, we have that. That's an opportunity for them to go to the Hill, visit their congressman. Same with State Officer Summit, where the state officers can go out to DC, do those congressional visits so they understand how that works. That's part of being a leader in your community, right? Is to advocate for your community and for the things that your community needs.
Definitely. Hey listeners, we're taking a quick break to give a special shout out to our friends and episode sponsor over at DK Dorpers. Located in the heart of Galt, California, DK Dorpers is a family farm that's been raising full-blood Dorper sheep since 2014. And let me tell you, they're all about fearless innovation, a value that resonates deeply with us at Within Range Coaching. They blend the best of U.S. and imported Australian genetics to uphold the Dorper breed standard, ensuring their sheep excel in the show ring pasture, and in taste. Their sheep are inspected and tagged annually by certified South African inspectors, ensuring you get the best of the best. So whether you're looking to start your own flock or elevate your breeding program to the next level, DK Dorpers has got you covered. If you're ready to take your farm to the next level, get in touch with Kathy Diaz-Concefid at 916-956-2657 or drop her an email at dkdorpers@gmail.com. For more information, visit their website at dkdorpers.com or check out their Facebook page, and everything is listed down in the description as well for ease of contact. Remember, excellence starts with the best genetics, and DK Dorpers delivers just that. Now, let's get back to the show. I guess on the adult side of the people that work for FFA, like, what is it that you guys, like, what is that? I don't want to say like a day in the life, but like the basic challenges, the basic jobs, like, I think that's kind of interesting, but I'm not really sure what question I want to ask there.
Sure. So I'll touch a little bit on advocacy and then go a little bit on some other pieces.
That works.
So with FFA, we're apolitical, right? So we're nonpartisan. When I talk about advocacy, we're really talking about issues that face our members or agriculture, such as the current Farm Bill. With the Farm Bill, one of the things that we're asking for is for a position in USDA that works with the youth organizations, so like FFA and 4-H. So I just want your listeners to be clear that we're not taking any political sides, of how the advocacy works. So that's also like a very fine line you have to walk, right? Of how do we advocate for our members and make sure that it's not political. So we have a team who does advocacy and also literacy that talks about ag literacy, how we share that ag literacy, works on pieces like Ag Day. We have a whole division, our educational division, which works with our advisors, which helps try and give them resources that they might be able to use in the classroom with their members. Then we have a leadership division who works with our state officers and with our conferences, our leadership conferences. So they figure out what that curriculum looks like, where those conferences are going to be, hire the facilitators, then works with members. And then we have an events division where they coordinate with all those conferences and of course with the convention, which is one of our largest events, as you know, because you've gone. For your listeners who just think it's, just a little convention, to put it in perspective, we use Lucas Oil Stadium, Bankers Life Field House, where the Pacers played until they got beat by the Celtics. The Indiana State Fairgrounds, 7 event hotels, and we book about 120 hotels for that week of convention. So it's a very large event that takes up the entire city. And we have a team who works with all of those venues to make sure we have the facilities that we need. So that's kind of an overview of some of the people who touch members every day. And then, of course, we have the stuff that doesn't touch members every day, like our finance department and our IT department that we couldn't do anything without. And then we have our foundation. And our foundation works with our corporate sponsors and our individual donors to explain the FFA story and hopefully get support so we can continue to do those programs. So that's kind of it in a nutshell. I will say that COVID was a little bit of a struggle for all of us. We were all working from home. The organization was great. When we did go back, we did hybrid. So 3 days a week we're in and we get to see everybody. And then 2 days a week we're still at home. But it's like I said, 105 people, but those individuals are very busy and we all have a passion for agriculture and for our members.
Yeah, I think that's always so funny to hear, because when you're a member, or I don't know, an outsider looking in and like seeing all the blue jackets and this and that, like you don't think of the 105 people that are, I guess, the people behind the mission, kind of using my own nomenclature there, but that are making it all happen, right? Like it's always so fascinating for me to hear like the organizational structure that businesses, nonprofits, et cetera have. Because 105 people, it sounds like a ton. And then once you start kind of getting involved in everything, you're like, okay, that's not a whole lot for a conference that has 75,000. Because isn't FFA total like 300? For how many people are in across the nation? Do you know off the top of your head?
Currently, we're more than 945,000, okay, but we are trending towards 1 million.
That is insane.
Yeah.
And what considerations need to be made as the membership grows on a national level? Because it's mostly the chapters that would be growing. So I figure the ag teachers, I'll probably have my ag teacher on at some point. But like, what is that significance as you kind of push to 1 million on the national level?
Yeah, a couple things. One, definitely, there's such a need for ag teachers, right? Because I don't think people understand that our ag teachers are so amazing because, yes, they're teaching, but they're also our FFA advisors. So they're doing so much outside of the classroom with their FFA members. And it's definitely not a 9 to 5 job for them. And so you run the risk of burnout. So we really need to make sure that we have that support for them. How can we support our ag advisors and ag education teachers, and how can we encourage those members to go into education? But then the other option is, or other avenue we really need to look at, is how do we make sure that all FFA members feel a part, right? Like, how do we make sure that they feel included? And so that's one of our jobs, is to make sure that we break down those barriers so that anybody who wants to be a member can be a member, and then make sure that we have those opportunities, right? We talked about more than 350 careers in ag. Well, knowing that there's a lot of opportunities for different SAEs, whether it's raising livestock, or maybe it's something as like working in a pet store or working at a zoo. Or we had one young lady, she worked as a whitewater raft guide, because that fell under outdoor recreation, which was a proficiency area. So, really letting people know that there's different opportunities there, and helping them understand that, while also helping them understand the importance of agriculture education. We're growing a lot in urban settings, and I think there's a couple reasons for that. I think that people now do have an interest of where their food comes from, right? So there's a lot of opportunities to do greenhouses, rooftop gardens, and really help people understand where their food comes from. But also the sciences. Science is huge right now, especially like biotechnology and food sciences. So there's also a big push there. So our challenge and our job is to break down those barriers for those members who want to be a part, to make sure they're a part, and also make sure that they feel welcomed.
Yeah, so it sounds like a lot of like diversity inclusion, whether it's, nationalities, skin color, like all these, like you were saying, from the, I don't know, the middle of nowhere town all the way to these metropolitan areas. Because I'm sure that those kids are also kind of like, why would I want to be in the farm group, But like you're saying, It's also that diversity and inclusion of careers, of pathways, of titles, jobs, careers. Because I don't know, the way that I kind of saw it in FFA was, whatever job you have, you can argue it for your project, right? Like there's some way that you could connect it, but even if you're making that stretch and you're fighting and arguing for, I felt like that was like a proficiency in and of itself, of trying to convince the ag teacher that this counts. I think she kind of played along with it too sometimes. But you look at it through a different lens. It's like, how is this actually benefiting me right now? Like, okay, right. Well, if I'm working as a cashier in the grocery store and you're like reading in the proficiency, like, how can I get this to work? Like you're taking a more active role in it even, which I feel like for kids is also so important, to see the value in every experience.
Yeah, absolutely. And everything that you're learning, right, in that hands-on experience is something that you can apply. We really talk about that. Like, I think sometimes we forget those soft skills that are needed. And so many of those opportunities, like working at a grocery store, those are skills that you can take to other places, right? Because, okay, you might think, well, I'm just stocking shelves, or I'm just checking out items, but you're having that interaction with people. You're still having those dialogues, that connectivity. So there's really a lot of pieces that you're learning as you go along.
And those experiences when you're 14, 15, 16 aren't that big of a deal until you're in your 30s and you find someone that doesn't have those skills.
Correct.
And you go, oh my good, what do you mean you don't know how to run a POS, like a point of sale? How do you not know how to greet a customer when they walk in? You know what I mean? Right. So it's like you get that leg up because you're having to do these different basic skills over and over and over again, that I feel like it becomes kind of like what you're saying earlier, like the curse of knowledge,
right?
Like you don't know that people don't know certain things and it doesn't make sense to you, but it's like you didn't know that 10, 15, 20 years ago.
Exactly.
Yeah. So like that's the student side, that trajectory. So, you come in as a freshman. I don't know. I felt like that was the biggest thing, was that I didn't know all the opportunities that you could do until I was a junior or senior. Because there's just so much stuff going on. You're getting all these different things thrown at you. And then you're a senior and you're like, well, shoot, like,
Right.
there's all
Right.
these other things I could have done. I wish I had more time, but like you don't. And I think that's the great thing about FFA is once you're an alumni, and this is my experience, like there's still opportunity to be involved. So like, can you kind of touch on that, like as a alumni, or I don't know, I feel like my fiance, once we move in together and everything, like she's also, I'm going to drag her into something. So even if you weren't in FFA, like what does that involvement look like from the alumni / adult side that doesn't necessarily work for the organization?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I'm actually glad you brought that up because our alumni and supporters, we recently changed the name to alumni and supporters. And that's because if you were not an FFA member, you could still be an alumni. For example, I was not an FFA, but I am a lifetime alumni member. Basically, the reason that we did that is we know so many people want to give back, right? So sure, people can give back monetarily, but if they're in alumni and supporter groups, they can also give back as mentors. A lot of our alumni and supporter chapters work with their local chapters, and maybe they go help them to practice for their competitive events, or maybe just to travel when they're going to their state convention or to their state conference. So there's so many opportunities for people to give back. And that's also an opportunity also, like if you have a potential SAE for a student, right? Maybe you're like, hey, maybe it's a local veterinarian who has an opportunity for someone to work in the vet office, that they can be like, hey, there's opportunities here. Do you have any members who are interested? So as an alumni and supporter, you can really give back and help those members really, become part of the community, help with their SAEs, help with their proficiencies. And, I think our members appreciate that. I think they appreciate having that adult connection of what their life can look like a little bit after. Right. So, and then I think the other piece too that a lot of alumni and supporters help with, many of our chapters like to give back to their communities. I would be remiss if I didn't talk a little bit about service. Many of our members have service projects in their community where they give back, whether it's community gardens, working at pantries. We also have a couple who have done dog toys for the local shelters. But you'll have those alumni and supporters who will be there for them to help during those projects, right? Like be there on site with those projects or encourage them of how to get involved. So there's so many opportunities for people to get involved and play a part. So my shameless plug, Ranger, is they can visit ffa.org /alumni and supporters and see how they can get involved locally and even nationally to give back and help those FFA members.
Sorry, I always try to Google things as people talk about it so that I can kind of see, and if I see anything of interest. I misspelled something, so I'll do it later. But but yeah, and I think that's I don't know, there's also such a cool aspect of being able to, when I was in college, when I was in high school, I showed poultry, right? And in college, I worked with one of the local 4-H groups, which is, I'd say is on the same parallel as FFA, but different, mm-hmm. right? And I was the poultry leader for a few years. And I don't know, it was just so funny and cool getting to talk about chickens for hours and hours a week. And I think that's the fun thing too, right? It's like you get to kind of nerd out with the kids, and it's a challenge in and of itself, because you take this information that, again, like we were talking about earlier, that is so common. Like I seriously had to explain what a beak is, or a comb, or the crop, and it's like those are names that I picked up on my own after a while. But now you have to take all that information and make it appropriate for your audience, which I think is something that, I don't know, not that I didn't do when I was in FFA, but not as intensely as I did as a supporter and alumni of the organization, right?
Yeah.
So it's like even then, there's still so much to learn and throw yourself into, essentially.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, I'd be remiss if I didn't say, as an alumni, I learn a lot from those members too, right?
Yeah.
Like it's definitely a two-way street.
Yeah. And I think that's also, it's humbling almost, right?
Yes, absolutely.
Where it's like, wait, did this kid just teach me something? And I'm supposed to be the expert? It's like,
right.
How do you manage that now? But yeah, I think that's so fascinating, so interesting. And I guess further on, what am I trying to say with this one? When it comes to that support and that advocacy, I guess on like the advocacy level, and I mean, I don't know, I feel like it's like always towing the line of being too political. Like, is there a way for folks that are alumni to get involved in that aspect of it? Maybe volunteer with like the other adults, or is that something we leave to the professionals rather than being hands-on with the kids? You know what I mean?
Yeah, I do think that's one that you have to tread really lightly on. So I
Yeah.
don't really know if there's a way for the adults to really get involved in that piece. I would say make sure to keep an ear out with your local school boards with the
Mm,
CTE, Career Technical Education, because that's what FFA falls onto is the Career and Technical Education. And so we always say, listen and make sure that those programs aren't getting cut. That's probably the best way to advocate for your FFA chapter and for your CTEs. That's the most important because when schools look at budgets, often those are the areas they look at first. So the best way for you to advocate is to be an advocate for agriculture education and FFA and really support career technical education.
there we go. I think that's what I was looking to ask for because,
Yeah.
yeah, I think because again, what is it like with government stuff? It's like the local level is what's most important because that's what directly
Yes.
affects you rather than the crazy stuff happening on national or international, right? Okay, so I think that's exactly what I was looking for. So, and I don't have kids or anything. So with that advocacy, is that something that you kind of just pay attention to in the local school board site? Like, do you have to have a kid actively involved to show up to those, or is it kind of just I know this is
Not,
important. I believe in this. We should keep
yeah.
this in our county, our district, or whatever.
I would just say most school boards, their agendas are always public, so you can always just kind of keep an eye on it. So, and it's school board meetings are open to the public unless they're an executive session. So, if there's ever an opportunity where you hear that they're thinking about taking away some of those CTE classes or FFA classes, just get involved and explain. The best way actually to stay involved is volunteer at an FFA chapter as an alumni, and then you'll know when those things come up and you won't have to worry about looking in the local paper or try to follow. So become involved with your FFA chapter, and then you'll know if there's ever an issue that you need to talk to the school board about.
Exactly. And with that, my the veterinary science team that I started, the what was it? Not the advisor, the coach, the mentor, leader, the adult that knows actually what they're talking about with it. Was the local veterinarian that I also interned for 4 or 5 years. And she's still involved to this day. So
Very nice.
whatever you do, there's some kind of project that you can be involved in. So,
Yeah, absolutely.
but yeah, I think that's a great place to kind of end it this is what FFA does for students, the career technical education, in the classroom, hands-on, working for someone, doing your own thing, doing your project, competing, whether it's at the local, state, national, whatever level, involvement for alumni and supporters, whether or not you're involved or not. I feel like everybody can kind of understand the importance of, I don't know, being there for students, mentoring them, teaching them these skills, and how to maintain that in schools and ensure that this kind of trend continues so that we can hit 1 million. Is there a projection for the 1 million that you guys know of, or?
Well, we are hoping, usually we know our new membership numbers in August. So we're hoping come August, we'll be able to make a big announcement.
Ooh, how exciting.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, Kristy, is there anything else that you feel these listeners should know about, or one last tidbit they want to walk away with, or anything?
I would say that we have great stories of our members, and if they would like to see some of those stories, follow us on social media. At National FFA, we're on Instagram, on X, and on Facebook, and actually on LinkedIn too. So if some people want to really kind of see some of our working with some corporate sponsors, you can find us there. But yeah, follow us on social, and if you need a lot more information about us, just visit ffa.org.
Perfect. I think that's fantastic. And as always, all the information is going to be linked down in the show notes, the direct for all of your social media accounts, the website, donations, et cetera, et cetera. And I'll even put the alumni and supporters link in there as well, because I finally found it. There's dashes in between the words.
Oh,
Oops. But yeah, awesome. Kristy, thank you so much. I appreciate your time, and I will talk to you guys, I don't know, throughout my journey and I'll probably beyond.
Wonderful. Ranger, thanks so much. Good luck on your journey. I love following you. And if you need anything else, you know where I am.
Perfect. Thank you.
Thanks.
And thank you to our listeners once again for taking time out of your day to listen to today's episode of the podcast. I personally had a great time talking to Kristy. I felt like I could finally nerd out about the FFA, and it was really fascinating for me to hear the professional behind the scenes side of it. Because I feel like as a member and alumni, you see very much, the blue jackets, the handshaking, the baby kissing on that end, but you don't really hear a whole lot about the actual work that goes in to make all of the magic happen. So if you'd like to be a part of that magic, as Kristy said, get involved with your local chapters, get involved with your local organizations. Even if you weren't a member before, it's still a great way for you to get into your local community, help support members and high school students as they start to develop the skills that will help them in their future careers. All their information is going to be down in the show notes, so go ahead and feel free to check them out, their social media, their website, etc., etc. And again, a thank you to today's episode sponsor. Their information will be in the show notes as well. And if I can ask one last thing of you, it would be for you to give us a rating and review on whatever podcast platform you're listening to. Ratings and reviews go a long way in terms of helping support the mission of the podcast, which is to help more people help more people. So if you can just do that, I would very much appreciate it. And if you've made it this far, I feel like you have something to say about the episode or the podcast in general. So if you could please do that, I'll be eternally grateful. And if you could share today's episode, I will be sure to share your share on my social media. Thanks again, guys. And as always, have fun, stay safe, and be yourself. We'll see you in the next one.